The air in the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art wasn't just filled with the scent of expensive perfume and blooming orchids. It was thick with the weight of ambition and old money. Tonight at the annual Nightingale Charity Ball, fortunes would be pledged, alliances would be forged, and reputations would be quietly shredded over glasses of vintage champagne. For Genevieve Holloway, it was a battlefield she had once navigated as a general's wife. Tonight she was entering as a ghost. Dressed in a simple, elegant navy silk gown that cost a fraction of the jewels on the woman next to her, she was invisible. And then she saw him. Her ex-husband Jonathan Beaumont, laughing with his new younger wife. The moment his eyes met hers, they didn't hold anger or sadness. They held nothing. A cold, dismissive emptiness that cut deeper than any insult. He turned away, and in that instant Genevieve wasn't just a ghost. She was nothing. Little did he or anyone else in that glittering hall know that the most powerful person in the room wasn't the one on the stage, but the woman everyone had just decided to ignore. The Nightingale Charity Ball was the undisputed pinnacle of New York's philanthropic season. It was a brutal theater of social hierarchy disguised as a fundraiser. To be invited was a statement. To be seen was a victory. To be ignored was a death sentence. Genevieve Holloway felt the chill of that sentence creep into her bones as she clutched the small beaded clutch in her hands. Her ticket hadn't come from a socialite's spare pile or a corporate table filler. She had bought it herself with money earned from her modest job appraising art for a small, independent auction house. It was a defiant act, a quiet declaration to herself that she still existed, that she wouldn't let the divorce erase her from the world she had once inhabited. The world Jonathan had built around her and then summarily torn down. She stood near a marble pillar, the cool stone a comfort against her back. The ballroom was a dizzying kaleidoscope of light and sound. Chandeliers like frozen waterfalls of crystal dripped light onto a sea of couture gowns and bespoke tuxedos. The murmur of conversation was a symphony of calculated compliments and veiled barbs. She saw faces she recognized, banking scions, tech moguls, political power brokers, all performing the intricate dance of the elite. And there, in the center of the most vibrant circle, was Jonathan. He was born for rooms like this. Tall, with a smile that could disarm regulators and charm investors, he radiated an effortless confidence that Genevieve now knew was a meticulously crafted facade. At his side, clinging to his arm, was Brittany Davenport. Her dress was a confection of pale pink tulle and diamonds, a stark contrast to Genevieve's understated navy silk. She was 25, a decade younger than Genevieve, with the bright, unlined face of someone who had never known a day of real struggle. As if sensing her gaze, Jonathan looked up. His eyes, the same ones that had once promised her forever, scanned right over her, then did a double take. A flicker of annoyance crossed his perfect features. He leaned down and whispered something to Brittany. Brittany's perfectly glossed lips curled into a smirk. She turned her eyes, sweeping over Genevieve's dress with theatrical disdain. It was a dismissal, so complete, so public, it felt like a slap. They didn't approach her. They didn't need to. The message was sent, and the surrounding socialites received it loud and clear. Genevieve Holloway is no longer one of us. She is an outcast. The temperature around her seemed to drop. A woman who had co-chaired a committee with her just 2 years ago, a Mrs. Lancaster, met her eyes for a brief second before turning sharply to her companion, her laughter a little too loud. A man who had once drunkenly complimented Genevieve's knowledge of Impressionism at one of Jonathan's dinner parties now stared straight through her as he passed. Each averted gaze, each stiff back was a fresh wound. This was Jonathan's power. He didn't need to scream or shout. He could kill you with silence. He had methodically cut her out of their shared world, rebranding their history with him as the charismatic victim, and her as the unstable, ungrateful wife who couldn't keep up. Genevieve took a steadying breath, her fingers tightening on her clutch. She wouldn't run. That's what he wanted. She had come here for a reason, to prove to herself she could stand in the same room as her past and not shatter. She spotted a familiar, kindlier face near the silent auction tables. Dr. Peterson, her old art history professor from Columbia, a man who had always encouraged her academic passions. He was the one who had written her a letter of recommendation for her current job. Seeing him was a small anchor in this hostile sea. She made her way towards him, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time that evening. "Dr. Peterson." The elderly man turned his eyes, lighting up in recognition. "Genevieve." "My dear, what a pleasant surprise. I haven't seen you since—" He trailed off, the unspoken divorce hanging in the air. "It's been a while," she said warmly. "It's so good to see you." "And you," he said, though his eyes darted nervously over her shoulder towards Jonathan's glittering circle. He was standing with the museum's acquisitions director, a notoriously snobbish man named Gregory Finch. "I was just admiring the lots they have for auction." Genevieve began, trying to steer the conversation to safe ground. "The Degas sketches—" Before she could finish, Gregory Finch's wife, a woman draped in emeralds, drifted over. "Robert," she said, completely ignoring Genevieve and taking Dr. Peterson by the arm. "Gregory wants your opinion on the new security measures for the East Wing. We simply must pull you away." Dr. Peterson shot Genevieve an apologetic look, a flash of pity in his eyes that was almost worse than the open contempt. "Forgive me, Genevieve." He was absorbed into the group, which immediately closed ranks, turning their backs to her. She was alone again, the snub even more painful for its proximity to a moment of kindness. The message was clear. Any association with her was a liability. She was radioactive. A ghost at the feast, a reminder of a story the victors had already rewritten. She felt a familiar crushing weight on her chest, the same weight she'd felt for the last 5 years of her marriage. She retreated to the edge of the room, finding a small, unoccupied alcove behind a large floral arrangement. From here she could watch without being seen, a spectator to her own social execution. Watching Jonathan hold court, it was hard to remember the man she had first met. He wasn't a Beaumont of the Boston Beaumonts then. He was just Jonathan, a fiercely ambitious junior analyst at a rival investment bank. They'd met at a dreary industry conference in Chicago. He was funny, laser-focused on her, and made her feel like the most interesting person in the world. He was captivated by her passion for art history, a field so different from his world of numbers and risk. "You see stories in paintings," he'd told her over dinner, his eyes alight with admiration. "I just see assets. Teach me how to see what you see." And she did. She took him to museums, explained the nuances of chiaroscuro in a Caravaggio, the raw emotion in a Rothko. He seemed to drink it in. He encouraged her to pursue her master's degree at Columbia, boasting to his friends about his brilliant, cultured girlfriend. She believed he valued her intellect, her unique perspective. She was wrong. He was just valuing a potential asset. The change was subtle at first, beginning after they got married, and his career began to skyrocket. Her expertise, once a source of fascination, became a cute hobby. "You don't really need to work, darling," he said one evening shortly after his first big promotion. He had just bought them a sprawling Park Avenue apartment. "Your job is to make this place a home to host the right people. That's a full-time job. It's more important for my career than the few thousand you make cataloging old paintings." She resisted at first, but he was persuasive. He framed it as a partnership. His success would be their success. Reluctantly, she left her junior position at the Met. Her days, once filled with research and history, were now filled with selecting caterers, approving floral arrangements, and remembering which CEO's wife was allergic to shellfish. She was good at it. She had a natural grace and a genuine interest in people that made their parties legendary. She was the perfect corporate wife, and she was miserable. Her world began to shrink. The money was his. She had an allowance deposited into a joint account he monitored. Once she spent $2,000 on a rare first edition book on Florentine art without consulting him. The ensuing argument wasn't a shouting match. It was worse. It was a cold, quiet lecture in his study where he calmly explained the concept of unapproved expenditures, as if she were a wayward employee. Jen, this isn't about the money, he said, his voice maddeningly patient. It's about respect for our financial goals. This book doesn't contribute to the Beaumont brand. The Beaumont brand became his mantra. It dictated the clothes she wore, classic, expensive, not too flashy, the friends she kept only those who could be strategic assets, and the opinions she expressed always aligned with his. He slowly, skillfully isolated her from her old university friends, calling them academically charming but commercially irrelevant. The final, deepest cut was his mockery of her passion. He started a small art collection guided by her recommendations. She poured her heart into it, finding promising young artists and undervalued historical pieces. The collection grew in value, and he took all the credit. At parties, he would stand in front of a painting she had spent weeks researching and pontificate on its merits using the very words she had used to explain it to him. If she tried to add a detail, he'd cut her off with a patronizing smile. "Let's not bore our guests with the dusty details, darling." She had become another one of his assets, a beautiful, well-educated accessory locked in a gilded cage. The divorce was brutal. He hired a team of ruthless lawyers who painted her as a gold digger. Since most of their assets were in his name, and the prenuptial agreement she'd foolishly signed was ironclad, she walked away with next to nothing. He kept the apartment, the art collection she had built, the friends, the life. She was left with a small settlement that barely covered the deposit on a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, and the crushing weight of her own invisibility. The first few months were a blur of tears and cheap wine. But slowly something deep inside her, the part of her that fell in love with art, that loved the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, began to stir. She took the job at the small auction house Windsor and Finch. It was a step down from the Met, but it was hers. She found joy again in the quiet, dusty work of authenticating a piece, of tracing its provenance through history. She was rebuilding her life piece by painful piece. Coming to the ball was supposed to be the final piece, a way to face the past and prove that she had survived it. But as she stood in her lonely alcove, the familiar feelings of worthlessness he had so expertly cultivated threatened to overwhelm her. He hadn't just divorced her, he had tried to unmake her. And as she watched him charm the room, she had to admit he had almost succeeded. From her hiding spot, the ballroom was a stage, and she was watching a play in which she had no part. The orchestra swelled, playing a generic, pleasant melody that served as a soundtrack for networking. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved like phantoms through the crowd, their silver trays laden with champagne flutes and delicate canapes. Genevieve's gaze kept returning to Jonathan. He was in his element, moving from group to group, a handshake here, a meaningful laugh there. He was speaking with Walter Cunningham, a notoriously ruthless private equity titan. Jonathan's company, Beaumont Capital, had been the subject of some unflattering rumors in the financial press lately, over-leveraged, a few bad bets on tech startups. She knew his tells. The way he tilted his head, the slightly too wide smile. He was hunting tonight. He needed an infusion of cash, a powerful new partner to quell the rumors. This ball wasn't just a social event for him. It was a lifeline. Brittany remained by his side, a perfect, smiling doll. She would occasionally lean in and whisper something in his ear, and he would nod, patting her hand. They were the image of a power couple, a portrait of success. No one looking at them would ever guess at the rot beneath the surface. Genevieve decided to risk another foray into the crowd, needing to feel the energy of the room, to not be a coward hiding behind a plant. She moved along the wall, her path taking her past a knot of women whose husbands were all in Jonathan's orbit. She recognized them from countless brunches and Hampton's weekends. They hadn't seen her yet. Honestly, it's an upgrade in every way," a woman named Diana was saying, swirling her champagne. "Brittany is from the Davenport family. It's a much better match pedigree-wise." "I heard the first wife was terribly needy," another added, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "An academic or something. Jonathan needs a partner, not a project." "Did you see her here tonight?" Diana hissed, a thrill of gossip in her voice. "Wearing that navy thing. It's positively funereal. It's like she wants everyone to feel sorry for her. So pathetic." Genevieve froze her back to them. Every word was a poisoned dart. Needy. A project. Pathetic. It was the narrative Jonathan had spun, and they had all bought it hook, line, and sinker. She forced her feet to move to carry her away, before they saw her, before they had the satisfaction of seeing the hurt in her eyes. She found herself by the silent auction tables again, pretending to study a set of pearl earrings. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. It wasn't just that they were insulting her. It was the casual, complete erasure of who she was. Her entire identity had been reduced to the needy first wife. Her degrees, her career, her very essence, all gone. Genevieve. The voice was low and unexpected. She turned to see a man named Philip Colbert, a junior partner at Jonathan's firm. He was young, ambitious, and always seemed to be sweating slightly, as if perpetually nervous. "Philip," she said, managing a cool, even tone, "I didn't expect to see you here." "The whole senior team is here," he said, avoiding her eyes and looking around nervously. "Jonathan wanted to make a strong showing for Mr. Cunningham." He took a gulp of his drink. "Listen, I wanted to say I was always sorry about how things... You know. It was the first crack in the united front, the first hint of humanity she'd encountered all night. But she knew Philip. He wasn't brave. He was just hedging his bets, offering a sliver of sympathy in the shadows where no one could see him. "Thank you, Philip," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "He's under a lot of pressure." Philip stammered, as if trying to justify his boss's behavior. "The Westbrook deal went south, and if Cunningham doesn't come on board..." He stopped himself, realizing he'd said too much. "Anyway, good to see you looking well." He scurried away as quickly as he'd appeared, melting back into the crowd. But his words lingered. The Westbrook deal went south. So the rumors were true. Jonathan wasn't just schmoozing. He was desperate. The knowledge didn't bring her the satisfaction she might have expected. It just made the whole spectacle feel even more hollow, more tragic. His entire world was a house of cards, and he was smiling and laughing as if he lived in a fortress. The lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly, and a man walked onto the stage, the museum director. It was time for the evening's main presentation. The speeches, the pledges, the celebration of wealth in the service of art. Genevieve felt a pang of longing for the simple love of art that had brought her here, a love now tainted by the ugly commerce of the evening. She decided she had endured enough. She had come, she had faced the beast, and she had survived. It was time to go home to her quiet apartment, her books, and her own life. She turned to head for the exit, wanting to slip out before the speeches began to disappear as quietly as she had arrived. But as she moved toward the grand arched doorway, another figure entered, moving against the tide of departing assistants and coat check staff. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 70s, with a shock of silver hair and a bearing of absolute authority. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo, but an impeccably tailored conservative charcoal suit that in this room stood out more than any sequin or diamond. His eyes, sharp and intelligent behind gold-rimmed spectacles, scanned the room with a singular purpose. He wasn't taking in the scene. He was looking for someone. He walked past billionaires and senators without giving them a second glance. His gaze swept the room, and for a heart-stopping second it landed directly on Genevieve. And then he started walking straight towards her. Time seemed to slow down. As the silver-haired man approached, a strange bubble of silence formed around Genevieve. The cacophony of the ballroom, the clinking glasses, the forced laughter, the orchestral music faded into a distant hum. She didn't recognize him. He wasn't part of Jonathan's world of finance or the high society circles she had been forced to travel in. There was an old-world gravity to him, a seriousness that felt utterly out of place amidst the evening's frivolity. He moved with an unhurried, deliberate pace. People instinctively parted for him, sensing the invisible aura of importance that surrounded him. A well-known real estate developer started to greet him, hand outstretched, but the man gave a curt, dismissive nod and continued on his path, his eyes never leaving Genevieve. Her mind raced. Who was he? A creditor of Jonathan's? A private investigator? Had she done something wrong? Every insecurity Jonathan had ever instilled in her rose to the surface. She felt a primal urge to flee, to turn and melt into the shadows, but her feet were rooted to the spot, held fast by the intensity of his gaze. He stopped a respectful 2 feet in front of her. His face was lined with the wisdom of age, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "Mrs. Genevieve Holloway?" he asked. His voice was a calm, resonant baritone. It was the first time all evening someone had used her proper name with such formal respect. "Yes." She managed her own voice, barely a whisper. "My name is Arthur Abernathy," he said, offering a slight formal bow of his head. "I am the senior partner at Abernathy, Cole & Finch. I apologize for the intrusion." The name of the law firm didn't register, but the name Finch snagged her attention. Windsor & Finch was the name of the auction house where she worked. It was likely a coincidence. New York was full of Finches. "How do you know who I am?" she asked, her confusion overriding her fear. "I was given a very specific description," Mr. Abernathy said, a faint ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And I was told to look for the one person in the room who seemed to appreciate the art more than the cocktails." He gave a subtle nod toward a small Monet on the far wall, a piece she had been admiring earlier. His observation was so astute, so specific, that it disarmed her completely. On the main stage, the museum director had finished his opening remarks and was now introducing the evening's guest of honor. No one was paying any attention to the quiet drama unfolding in the corner. "I represent the estate of the late Mr. Alistair Finch," he continued, his voice dropping slightly. Genevieve's mind spun. Alistair Finch. He had been the reclusive, silent partner in her auction house. A mythical figure no one had ever met, who communicated only through his lawyers. He had passed away a few weeks ago. The office had held a moment of silence, and then life had moved on. She had never met him, never even seen a photograph of him. I work for Windsor & Finch," she stammered. "I'm very sorry for your client's passing." "Mr. Finch was aware of your employment," Mr. Abernathy said. "He was aware of a great many things." He paused, his gaze becoming more serious. "Mrs. Holloway, I have been trying to reach you for the past 2 weeks. The letters sent to your apartment were returned, and you have no listed phone number." I don't have a landline," she said, feeling flustered. "The letters, my mailbox lock was broken. I've been meaning to get it fixed." It was a small, pathetic detail, but it was the truth. In the grand scheme of her upended life, a broken mailbox had been low on the priority list. Mr. Abernathy simply nodded, accepting her explanation without judgment. "Circumstances have compelled me to seek you out personally. The reading of Mr. Finch's last will and testament was this morning. Your presence was required." My presence. Why, I didn't know him. A commotion was starting on stage. The auctioneer was preparing to start the live auction, beginning with a week-long stay at a private villa in Tuscany. The crowd's attention was shifting. "Mr. Finch, it seems, knew you," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice firm but gentle. "He followed your academic career for years. He read your master's thesis on post-war provenance. He was the anonymous benefactor who funded the fellowship you won at Columbia. He believed you were one of the few people left in the world with a pure, uncorrupted passion for art and history." Genevieve felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. The fellowship, that had been the seed money that allowed her to finish her degree. She had always assumed it came from the university's general fund. The idea that this unknown man had been watching over her, a silent patron in her life, was staggering. "Why?" she breathed. "He had no children of his own," Mr. Abernathy explained. "His family was small and distant. He spent his life building a legacy not of money but of preserved beauty, a vast collection of art and historical artifacts. He needed to leave it to someone who would understand its soul, not just its value. Someone who would be a guardian, not a merchant." From across the room she saw Jonathan place a winning bid on the Tuscany villa, a casual wave of his paddle. He turned to Brittany and kissed her, and the crowd applauded politely. The sight barely registered. Her reality was being completely rewritten in this quiet corner by a man in a charcoal suit. "Mrs. Holloway," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice pulling her back. "There is a matter of some urgency we must discuss, a matter that pertains to the final disposition of Mr. Finch's estate." He looked towards the stage, then back at her. "I believe it might be better to make this official. The chairman of the board is an old friend of mine. Will you permit me a moment on the stage?" Genevieve couldn't speak. She could only nod, a sense of dreamlike unreality washing over her. She watched as Mr. Abernathy made his way toward the stage, a man on a mission, leaving her standing alone in the crowd, the unwitting center of a storm she couldn't yet comprehend. The live auction was in full swing. Jonathan Beaumont, feeling magnanimous after his ostentatious purchase of the Tuscan villa, was leaning back in his chair, one arm draped possessively around Brittany. He had just seen Walter Cunningham give him a nod of approval from across the room. The night was going perfectly. His gambit was working. He was projecting power, wealth, and stability. His comeback was imminent. The auctioneer was trying to whip up excitement for a diamond necklace when he was interrupted. Arthur Abernathy had ascended the small steps to the stage and was speaking quietly but urgently to the museum director and the ball's chairman. The exchange was brief. The chairman, a man who commanded billions with a single phone call, looked at Abernathy, then out into the crowd towards Genevieve, and then back at Abernathy with an expression of stunned disbelief. He nodded slowly and tapped the auctioneer on the shoulder. The auctioneer, flustered by the breach of protocol, cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a brief unscheduled interlude. Please welcome Mr. Arthur Abernathy, who has an important announcement to make." A murmur went through the crowd. Who was this man in the plain suit? Jonathan shifted in his seat, annoyed by the interruption to his perfectly curated evening. He watched Abernathy step up to the microphone. "Good evening." Abernathy began, his voice amplified through the ballroom, calm and clear as a bell. It commanded immediate silence. "My name is Arthur Abernathy. I am the executor of the estate of the late Mr. Alistair Finch." The name sent a ripple through the room. Alistair Finch was a legend, a ghost in the machine of global finance and art collection. Everyone knew of him, but no one knew him. He was rumored to be one of the museum's largest yet most private benefactors. "As many of you know," Abernathy continued, "Mr. Finch was a devoted but intensely private patron of the arts. His final wish was that his privacy be honored, but he also included a specific codicil in his will to be enacted at this very event, an institution he so dearly loved." Jonathan leaned forward, slightly intrigued despite himself. This was unexpected. Perhaps Finch had left a massive bequest to the museum. Mr. Finch dedicated his life to the careful acquisition and preservation of what is considered one of the most significant private art collections in the world, Abernathy said. His estate also includes controlling interests in Finch Global Corp., extensive real estate holdings, and a diversified portfolio of securities. The disposition of this estate has been his primary concern for the past decade. The air was thick with anticipation. Every banker in the room was mentally calculating the value of such an empire. After a long and meticulous search for a suitable heir, Abernathy's eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto Genevieve, who stood frozen near the back. "Mr. Finch has chosen to bequeath the entirety of his estate without condition to a single individual, a person he believed possessed the integrity, knowledge, and soul to become the custodian of his life's work." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the fizz of champagne bubbles in a nearby glass. "It is my legal duty and my distinct honor to publicly announce the sole beneficiary of the Alistair Finch estate." Abernathy declared, his voice ringing with authority. He raised his hand and pointed directly at the woman in the simple navy dress. "Mrs. Genevieve Holloway." For a full 10 seconds nothing happened. The name just hung in the air, meaningless to most. Then a collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Heads swiveled. 1,000 pairs of eyes searched for the woman who had been named. They found her standing alone, her face pale in the dim light, looking as stunned as they were. Jonathan Beaumont's smile froze on his face. He blinked, certain he had misheard. Genevieve. His Genevieve impossible. It had to be another Genevieve Holloway. But Abernathy wasn't finished. The estate, he announced as if delivering a verdict, which includes the Finch collection, all corporate assets and liquid capital, has a current certified net value in excess of $2.7 billion. The sound that followed was a physical shockwave of noise. Gasps turned into frantic whispers. Champagne glasses clattered. On the stage, the museum director's jaw was slack. $2.7 billion. The number echoed in the cavernous space, an impossible life-altering figure. Jonathan felt the blood drain from his face. His vision tunneled until the only thing he could see was Genevieve standing there as a spotlight of 1,000 stares descended upon her. The woman he had mocked. The woman he had discarded. The project. The needy wife. The woman he had publicly humiliated not 30 minutes ago. Brittany beside him was sputtering. "What, who? Her, it's a joke, right? Jonathan, tell me it's a joke." But it wasn't a joke. The look on Arthur Abernathy's face was one of grim finality. He stepped away from the microphone and began to descend the stairs, making his way back towards Genevieve, the crowd parting before him like the Red Sea. The ghost at the feast had just become the queen. And the king, Jonathan Beaumont, felt his throne turn to dust beneath him. The aftermath of the announcement was chaos. The carefully constructed artifice of the gala shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The polite murmur was replaced by a roar of excited, incredulous chatter. Cell phones emerged from glittering purses, their screens lighting up faces as people frantically Googled Alistair Finch and Genevieve Holloway. The press photographers, who had been lazily snapping pictures of socialites, suddenly surged forward, their flashes firing like a strobe light, all aimed at the still frozen figure in navy silk. Genevieve felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were floating above her own body watching the scene unfold. $2.7 billion. The number was abstract nonsensical. It didn't feel real. More real was the sudden suffocating press of people. Mrs. Lancaster, the woman who had cut her dead earlier, was suddenly at her elbow, her face a mask of fawning concern. "Genevieve, my dear, I had no idea. How absolutely marvelous. We must have lunch. You simply must tell me everything." Gregory Finch, the snobbish acquisitions director, pushed his way through, his wife trailing behind him. "Mrs. Holloway," he boomed, his voice oozing a sycophancy that was nauseating. "A true connoisseur has been recognized. I speak for the entire museum when I say how thrilled we are to have such a discerning custodian for the Finch legacy." People she hadn't spoken to in years were surrounding her, touching her arm, thrusting business cards into her hands. They were all talking at once, their voices a meaningless torrent of congratulations and invitations. They didn't see her. They saw the number. They saw the power. Through a gap in the crowd she saw Jonathan. He was on his feet, his face a ghastly shade of white. His carefully maintained mask of control had crumbled, replaced by a raw, naked expression of utter disbelief, and something else. Panic. He started pushing his way toward her, his movements clumsy and desperate. Genevieve," he called out, his voice strained. But before he could reach her, Mr. Abernathy was there, flanking her like a Secret Service agent. Two other men, clearly security, materialized out of nowhere and formed a quiet but impenetrable barrier. "I think Mrs. Holloway has had enough excitement for one evening," Mr. Abernathy said calmly to the clamoring crowd. Jonathan finally broke through the inner circle of sycophants, his eyes wild. He stared at Genevieve, and in that moment she saw the full arc of their lives together in his expression, the initial flicker of greed, the swift calculation of what her new status meant for him, and the dawning, sickening horror of what he had thrown away. "Jen, we need to talk," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. This is incredible. I don't understand." Brittany was right behind him, her beautiful face twisted in a mask of rage and jealousy. "What did you do? she hissed at Genevieve, her voice low and venomous. "Who did you sleep with to get that?" The crassness of the accusation was so shocking it snapped Genevieve out of her stupor. A cold, clear anger cut through her confusion. She looked at Brittany, then at the desperate, pathetic man she used to love. She really saw them for the first time, small, grasping people terrified of losing their place in a world built on illusion. She looked Jonathan dead in the eye. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "There's nothing to talk about, Jonathan," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You and I have said everything that needs to be said." His face crumpled. "But our history, what we had, she said the words sharp and precise, "was an arrangement that suited you. The arrangement is over." The finality in her tone struck him silent. He looked around, seeing the faces of his peers, his potential investors, all watching this public implosion. He saw Walter Cunningham, the man he had been courting all night, staring at him with a look of cold pity and reassessment. In a single moment, Jonathan Beaumont had gone from predator to prey. His financial desperation, which he had so carefully concealed, was now laid bare in the context of his ex-wife's astronomical good fortune. Who would invest in a man who had fumbled an alliance with a billionaire? His Beaumont brand was now a laughingstock. Mr. Abernathy leaned in towards Genevieve. "There is a car waiting for you at the side entrance, Mrs. Holloway, whenever you are ready." Ready. She was more than ready. She gave a final sweeping glance at the room full of shocked faces, at the man whose world she had just inadvertently destroyed, and at the life she was leaving behind forever. She felt no triumph, no desire for revenge, only a profound, quiet sense of release. She turned her back on Jonathan Beaumont without another word and let Mr. Abernathy guide her through the parting sea of people towards the door and her new unimaginable future. Following Mr. Abernathy was like walking in the wake of a ship. The crowd parted their whispers, following her like a rustle of leaves. The flashes of cameras were relentless, but she kept her eyes fixed straight ahead on the ornate double doors that promised escape. As they reached the relative quiet of the marble-floored lobby, the museum director hurried to catch up with them. "Mrs. Holloway, Genevieve, on behalf of the entire board, please accept my profound congratulations. Alistair was a dear, if distant, friend. He chose well. If there is anything at all the museum can do for you, you have only to ask." The man who an hour ago wouldn't have recognized her was now offering her the keys to the kingdom. Genevieve paused, turning to face him. The shock was receding, replaced by a nascent sense of clarity and purpose. She thought of Alistair Finch, the mysterious man who had seen her when no one else had. He hadn't just given her money. He had given her a responsibility, a legacy. "Thank you, Director," she said, her voice resonating with a newfound confidence she didn't know she possessed. Mr. Finch was a passionate believer in making art accessible. In honor of his memory and to begin my stewardship of his legacy, I would like to pledge a donation from the estate of $50 million to the museum's educational and outreach programs. The director's jaw dropped. $50 million. It was a staggering sum, one of the largest single donations in the museum's history. Furthermore, Genevieve continued, her voice gaining strength, "I will be personally overseeing the creation of the Alistair Finch Fellowship for Provenance Research to support young academics in the field, the very field Mr. Finch supported for me." She glanced briefly at Dr. Peterson, who was standing nearby, looking at her with tears of pride welling in his eyes. It was a masterstroke. In less than a minute, she had transformed herself from a stunned heiress into a formidable philanthropist. She wasn't just a recipient of fortune, she was a wielder of it. She had seized control of her own narrative, defining herself by her actions, not by the shock of her inheritance. Mr. Abernathy allowed himself a small, proud smile. "The car is just outside, Mrs. Holloway." They stepped out of the museum's side entrance into the cool night air. The chaos of the gala was a distant noise. Waiting at the curb was not a taxi, but a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom, its engine humming silently. A uniformed driver held the door open for her. Before she got in, she heard one last desperate cry. "Jen!" It was Jonathan. He had somehow slipped past the security and run out after her. He stood on the sidewalk, his tuxedo rumpled, his face etched with desperation. The powerful, confident man was gone, replaced by a ghost of his own making. "Please, Jen, don't do this," he begged, taking a step towards her. "We can fix this. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." Genevieve looked at him, the man who had systematically dismantled her self-worth, who had cast her aside for a younger, wealthier model, now begging for scraps from her table. There was no anger left. There was no hatred. There was only a vast empty space where her love for him used to be. "Goodbye, Jonathan," she said, her voice soft but final. She slid into the plush leather interior of the Rolls-Royce. The door closed with a solid, satisfying thud, sealing out the sounds of her old life. As the car pulled away from the curb, she looked through the tinted window. Jonathan stood on the sidewalk, a solitary, shrinking figure under the glow of a street lamp, watching his past, his future, and his last chance at redemption drive away into the New York night. Genevieve Holloway did not look back. She was facing forward towards a dawn that was entirely her own. The silence inside the Rolls-Royce was profound. It was a dense, heavy quiet, insulated from the city's symphony of sirens and horns. The streetlights of Manhattan slid across the polished wood interior, casting fleeting glows on Genevieve's hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. Outside the tinted windows, the world she knew, the world of walk-up apartments, crowded subways, and careful budgets, rushed by, already feeling like a distant country. For several minutes neither she nor Mr. Abernathy spoke. Genevieve stared unseeingly at the passing city, her mind a whirlwind of numbers and emotions. $2.7 billion. $50 million. The words echoed, but the reality behind them remained elusive, like a dream she couldn't quite grasp. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation with Jonathan and the impromptu press conference was beginning to fade, leaving a tremor in its wake. "Are you all right, Mrs. Holloway?" Mr. Abernathy asked, his voice gentle, cutting through her reverie. Genevieve turned to look at the kind, serious man beside her. "I'm not sure what I am," she answered honestly, her voice a little shaky. "It doesn't feel real. I keep expecting to wake up." "I assure you this is very real," he said with a small, reassuring smile. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with dark red wax, bearing the imprint of a stylized F. "Mr. Finch anticipated you might feel this way. He instructed me to give this to you on the evening you were informed of your inheritance. He wanted you to hear it from him in his own words." Genevieve took the envelope. The paper was heavy, expensive. Her name, Genevieve Holloway, was written across the front in a strong, elegant script. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a single folded sheet of stationery. "My dear Mrs. Holloway," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then my long search is over and my life's work is in your hands. Forgive the dramatic nature of this introduction. I have always been a private man, and I felt it was better to let my legacy speak for me. For years I have followed your work. I read your paper on the restitution of stolen art after World War II, and was struck not by its academic brilliance alone, but by its moral clarity. In a world that sees art as a commodity, you see it as a piece of the human soul, a testament to history that must be honored. When your husband, your ex-husband now I trust, began acquiring his collection, I watched as you guided him with a purity of taste he could never comprehend. He bought names, you found beauty. I have no family to whom I could entrust my collection. They see only the price tags. I needed a guardian, not an heir. Someone who understands that the value of a thing is not what it costs, but the story it tells. I did not give you this fortune to make you rich, Mrs. Holloway, although you are now exceedingly so. I gave it to you to empower you to do what you were always meant to do, to protect, to preserve, and to champion our shared history. The money is merely a tool to that end. It is a shield and a sword. Use it to defend beauty from the cynics and the merchants. Do not be intimidated by the scale of it. Trust your instincts. They are the finest I have ever encountered. Welcome to your new life. Do good work." It was signed simply, Alistair Finch. Tears welled in Genevieve's eyes as she finished reading. They were not tears of shock or sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming sense of being seen. After years of being diminished and dismissed, of having her passion treated as a frivolous hobby, this man she had never met had understood the very core of who she was. The inheritance was not a lottery ticket. It was a calling. "He was a remarkable man," Mr. Abernathy said quietly, having given her the space to read. "I wish I could have met him," she whispered, folding the letter carefully and clutching it to her chest. "To thank him." "In a way you will," the lawyer replied. "You will meet him in every painting in the collection and every decision the foundation makes." The car was slowing now, turning onto Fifth Avenue. It pulled to a stop before one of the most prestigious pre-war buildings on the block, a grand limestone edifice with a green canopy and a doorman in full livery. "Where are we?" Genevieve asked, her voice filled with confusion. Her own apartment was dozens of blocks uptown and a world away in status. This was Mr. Finch's primary residence, Mr. Abernathy explained as the driver came around to open her door. "It is now yours. We took the liberty of having your personal effects from your apartment discreetly moved here this afternoon. We felt you would not wish to return there." The thought of her small, worn-out apartment with its broken mailbox and leaky faucet felt like a lifetime ago. Stepping out of the car, she looked up at the towering building. The doorman, a distinguished man with graying temples, stepped forward and tipped his hat. "Good evening, Mrs. Holloway," he said, his tone one of quiet, respectful welcome. "We have been expecting you. Welcome home." Mr. Abernathy gestured toward the ornate lobby doors. "This is your new beginning, Genevieve." Taking a deep breath, clutching the letter from Alistair Finch like a talisman, Genevieve walked through the doors. She was no longer a ghost at the feast. She was the mistress of a new house, the steward of an incredible legacy, and for the first time in a very long time, the author of her own story. The weight of it all was immense, but for the first time she felt strong enough to carry it. And so, Genevieve's story isn't just about going from rags to riches. It's a powerful testament to the quiet strength that resides in all of us, even when the world tries to convince us we are invisible. It's a story about a woman who was stripped of everything but her own integrity and intellect, and how those qualities proved to be the most valuable assets of all. Her vindication wasn't just in the money. It was in the moment she reclaimed her own voice, proving that true power isn't about who you know or what you own, but about who you are when no one is watching. Her journey reminds us that sometimes the greatest comebacks are born from the deepest betrayals, and that your true worth is never determined by those who choose to underestimate you. If Genevieve's incredible story of resilience and ultimate triumph moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life stories that will inspire and amaze you. Thank you for listening.